Here we are, fading in, looking sharp.
I know I am.
Yeah, it's hey, good afternoon. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous fall day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what is it? It's like 30 something degrees here. Oh, no, it actually got up to 55, but it was 30 something this morning, but absolutely gorgeous. I love this weather.
Yeah, no, it's. And I'm also a bit in denial because like last night it was, not last night, yesterday afternoon about 4, it was really nice, and I'm like, I can't believe it's going to be dark in an hour.
Right.
And it was, and the same kind of thing. Still acclimating to the limited light, but there's certain things that like I was fantasizing about playing disc golf at 6:30 at night with the light. Oh well.
Happening.
No.
Even if it's the temperature's okay with it. Yeah. Just what it is. You know, I went for a nice walk this morning out there enjoying the day, watching the leaves fall. It's like, oh, it's beautiful. Nice. I like fall if it wasn't for winter. If it wasn't for the dark, let's be really specific. I just don't like the dark, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Are you getting ready, thinking about Christmas yet? Getting ready for that?
A little bit. You know, it's funny because Vanessa woke up this morning and she's like, Thanksgiving's next week. I'm like, yeah, it's next week. But we're already thinking about Christmas and what kind of things we want to do. We're taking the week after Christmas off, and we're probably going to put some flooring in, which is always fun, very Christmassy. Yeah. But I don't know, you know, it's interesting because, you know, you know this with the boys, you know, they're seniors. Christmas doesn't hold quite the fascination that it did. And so you find new ways to kind of celebrate as a family. So, and we're kind of in that zone a little bit. Sam isn't like, ooh, Christmas, you know, it's more like, all right, Christmas.
It's Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they get harder to buy for the older they get.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but my boys is like, ugh. I spend all year thinking, okay, what am I going to get him? I finally come up with a couple of things that I can get, but it's like I had to listen for the last maybe 6 months going, okay, what is something he would like? Because they can go buy whatever they want at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, it's not like Sam has a job or anything like that, but it's also not as if he is wanting for anything, you know.
Right.
And even we're like, well, do you have any ideas? He's like, I don't know.
Right.
But he's into basketball right now, so he would like an indoor, like a nicer indoor basketball. And then our
little, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have an outdoor portable hoop that got blown over during a windstorm a couple years ago, and he still shoots on it, but the backboard's actually shattered in a couple of places. So,
would he enjoy a Blazer card? A trading card.
Oh, he might. He loves the Blazers.
I know. That's why I'm asking. Maybe I can see if Dawson can try and find a good one.
Oh, sure. Well, we should talk about that after the podcast because we're kind of...
Not that you listen to this, right?
Oh, there's not a chance. Not a chance.
All right, onto the sermon. So let's see. I was talking about Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. It's in a lot of ways just a summary of the foundational what Christianity is about. It talks about how Jesus, because he loves us, because God loves us, he gave his son, he gave Jesus for us, that we would become beloved children. And then out of being beloved children, that is the wellspring by which we live our lives as Christians, loving other people. That's really what that's Christianity pretty much in a nutshell. And then, so I talked a lot about the what does it mean to be a beloved child? Because that foundation of who you are is something that is something we really need to work on. We've built our identity, our foundation of how we see ourselves, layer by layer, moment by moment, since we were very small. And that foundation can be moved, like you can move the foundation of a house, but it's hard. But the rewards are gigantic. And so he just kind of walked through what has Paul been saying in Ephesians about who we are, that we're forgiven and we're holy and we're adopted and we have hope. We have the riches of God, and we have inheritance, we have power, we're secure. All of these things. There's so many rich things that we are. And I kind of ended with going back to what I said a couple weeks ago, looking at the beginning of chapter 4, this section saying, God has given people to the church to help us grow. We need other people to help us see ourselves and see the lies that we've believed about ourselves. Because it takes hard work, but we need people. We need people to help us do that. So, in a nutshell, that's the sermon.
And there's really a lot to unpack there, because on the surface, I think it's like, well, of course, there's a certain, and we actually you mentioned this is not like a particularly new message, and I maybe beat that up a little bit ahead of time, but
fantastic.
It's really easy to fall back into seeing ourselves a specific way, because that's the way we have always identified, or it's the way that people have kind of set us up, if that's the right word. And I'll give you an example that might make it more useful. In my mid-20s, I made a series of pretty bad decisions, or unwise, foolish decisions. And in fall of 1996, I had been demoted at my job, and my girlfriend had dumped me, and I didn't really have any prospects, for the future. Just kind of just making foolish decisions. And when I would reflect on that time around people, I would talk about what a loser I was. And I was a loser. I'm like, well, you were never a loser. I'm like, I don't know. But then when I moved back to Portland in 2003, I was very concerned about certain people who lived in Portland that were friends or people that I'd worked with, whatever, that would, even though I felt like I had redefined myself with my success and my the things that I'd done, that they would, try to pull me back in, or I would try to pull myself back into believing that I wasn't successful, or that I was just a guy who was going to continue to make mistakes or make bad decisions. And Vanessa was really key in helping me unwind that a bit. Continuing, there was a guy that I used to work for, owns a company. He's a friend of mine now, but at the time he was just an ex-employer, basically. And I ran into him, and he's like, "Oh, are you going to do this again?" And basically referenced something I'd screwed up like 10 years earlier. And he said it in a way to be joking, but I immediately felt myself go into that. Oh, yep, that's right. I am a loser. And Vanessa had been there, and later she's like, "That wasn't kind what he did there, and it's not true. And I hope you didn't take it that way." So it's a long way of explaining how the way we've thought about ourselves in the past, the way other people have engaged with us, can sometimes feel like constraints, or they're very tempting to put that identity back on, like a comfortable jacket, like love is a hammer. Those chains, I've gotten used to them,
Well, and your story rightfully illustrates that people can help you in one way or the other. I mean, Vanessa help redefine you as who you actually are, not a loser, and your friend, probably completely unaware of what he was doing. Sure. And was actually trying to encourage the other one. And then, I mean, but we have people that in our lives that because they hadn't seen you. He probably hadn't really had any interaction between the two. He didn't know that you had changed. And so, and our parents can be the same way. So many of us, when we go back to visit our parents, they still see us as that, teenager, or our brothers and sisters do. And yeah, that's not who I am. And so surrounding ourselves with the right people it's just critical. Just is. There's no way around it.
Yeah. Something that you said, I mean, you talked a little bit about counseling, but less specifically the idea that there should be people in our lives that we trust to help reflect back to us how truly good we are, or even to tell us when we're not as good as we should be, but that are willing to kind of speak truthfully into that. Just the idea that, no, the way you're interpreting that isn't correct. You're just fine. We start to beat up ourselves, or we fail to see our innate goodness, especially.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. And it's, sorry, did you guys hear the train? I'm sorry if you did.
Nope, not hearing it.
Oh, good. So, trying to get back on track. So, yeah, what you were saying is people. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, I did encourage counselors, and one of the things that helped me was that switch to really seeing them as professional disciplers. You put a Christian word that makes maybe a lot of us would be a lot more comfortable with, but so are life coaches, so are spiritual directors. You can have friends that fill a lot of these roles. But if we're real honest, most won't. Even ones who just want to be your cheerleader and tell you, and then you have friends like that too. And we've talked about that. They'll be on your side even if you're wrong. Doesn't matter which, right?
Yeah.
They will never tell you wrong because that's just the nature of their friendship, and that's okay. It's good to have people like that too. But the ones who will look you in the eye and tell you, "Wait a minute, buddy, I love you. You're screwing up." That's hard. It's rarer. Yeah.
And we're not just looking for cheerleaders. It is good to have people say, "Hey, I see the way you're responding to that. You're not responding to truth." Like, and I wish I could find a better way to say it, but like, my dad would do this for me every once in a while, where I would talk about, "Man, I remember running track and I was terrible," and he's like, "You were one of the most courageous people that I knew, because no, you weren't the best, but you worked harder than everybody. And even though you weren't winning, you kept showing up and you kept doing it." So it's just like you're responding to a very narrow perspective of that. And to have somebody who's outside of it that can look at it, they can offer that different perspective that's really enlightening.
It is. It really is. And I would even go so far as to say, I think you have to have somebody to really deeply grow, because this is hard stuff, but a lot of I don't know if it's about you, but a lot of my friends, and I would call them friends, they never really ask me deep questions at all. Right? I mean, they're like, it's all surfacey stuff, which is fine, like, about the basketball game or football or a movie or the kids, but nothing, but even the kids is just dips a little bit and then back up to actually just sit down and really have a heart to heart conversation. It's again, I think it has to become intentional. I think you have to invite it, because most people won't do it. I don't know. Maybe I keep beating the same issue. But.
No, I don't think you do. I think there's a difference between people that you're friendly with, acquaintances. I mean, and then people with deep friendships. I think I've mentioned in the past that, and including in front of the church, that I have a tough time when somebody says, "How are you doing?" not responding like beyond the surface. You know what I mean? Like, it's I don't like to say I'm fine. It doesn't feel like an authentic response. Um, and I also know that there are people that like might want a deeper response from me that I don't have time for, or we haven't invested in each other enough to warrant that degree of like vulnerability, or even from a practical sense, time. And
Yeah.
that's not a rejection necessarily. Some of it's just very practical. And that's why I
Right.
think you have to cultivate. My friend Mark Pierce, he and I have coffee most Saturdays at 8, and we talk about the deep stuff, the things that we're struggling with. And sometimes we talk about dumb stuff because we don't
Yeah.
need to dig in. But it's a cultivated relationship, and it's an investment that each of us have made of time to spend to get into that stuff and to be honest with each other and to help each other when we've asked for help, you know?
And I think that's really important to have those kinds of relationships. Um, and if you can get one, that's fantastic. It's hard for most people to find them, and I think that's why I've encouraged the professional discipleships, counselors, because you get that almost automatically. Yes, you have to pay for it, but it's worth it. It really is worth it, because I and I've personally struggled so much with this issue
Hmm.
over the years, just self. You know, no one in my family with the counseling that we knew about, and certainly not in my immediate family. You just don't do that stuff, And so even until even in the last maybe 10 years, I really finally started to realize how important that is. And there was a time where I thought, well, the older generations didn't have things to work through. Maybe they just didn't need it. Like, oh, no, they did. They just never did.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people, you can limp through life and have a lot of baggage and hurts, and you're acting out of that. And for many people, they can be survive and do okay with all that. But that's what we're asking for. We want to get even better. We want a better thriving life. We want to be more life-giving to the people around us. And that takes hard work. And I know that people want me to preach on stuff that's practical. It's Yeah, but this is super practical. It's just not the hard work you want to do.
Yeah. Well, right. Um, yeah. I think there's a kind of I think an underlying issue that we have, which is we would like affirmation. We would like people to tell us you're doing great, as in the decisions you're making are fantastic. This message is, I'm going to half my message is to tell you how great you're doing. And the other half of my message is, those other people who aren't doing great. But in the meantime, you can feel good about yourself because you've got this handled. And I say that as a person who thinks that way sometimes during the message. Like, this
They,
isn't what, yeah.
no, go
So,
ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I mean, I think that's kind of we can reject some of those, the practical. Here's what you need to work on, because we can get wrapped up in patting ourselves on the back, and again,
Oh, right. But it's so helpful to work through grief and painful events in your life. And if you have a significant other, they often can, even if they can't know how to help you get better at some of these things, they can at least point out where you need to grow, because you're close enough to your life. Your kids would tell you, because again, they see you most of them see you pretty clearly, because they live with you. And so if you don't know what you need to work on, well, they'll tell you. Um, but it's finding that person to really help you. And counseling is not my personal gift. It's just I want to be. I don't even know if I'd want it. No, I'd rather be a musician if I could be any. If I could have another gift. Um, I'd love to be able to play piano or guitar and preach at the same time. Like, yeah, but that's not me. but not counseling is not my gift at all. But there are people who are. They're very, very good at it. Employ them, and that's why God gave it to us.
Yeah. I think about Jesus being kind of the ultimate model for counseling, because here's somebody that would kind of reflect back to you where you're at,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you understand that you're cared for, and then provide some guidance for how to move forward in a healthier way. I mean, if you look at his stories, you see there's a consistency to that, and that's so much of what you're hoping for with the professional discipleship that we're talking about. The best counselors that I've had listened patiently and would occasionally kind of check in with questions and things like that, and then gently guide, like, here's what I'd like you to consider. Here's some things to think about. And ultimately also not condoning my mistakes or
Up for them either.
correct. Right. Yeah.
Okay, you made a mistake. You didn't want to do that. All right. Well, how do we go forward here?
Right.
Yeah. Which isn't that how the Holy Spirit is supposed to work too, right? Because we're so good at beating ourselves up, and that's part of that self-identity.
Right.
It's amazing, and there's so many ways that we don't see ourselves rightly, And it's something I've been saying lately, and I'll say it again here. He's like, you really do believe lies about yourself up until the moment that you realize that they're lies. So you think you're looking at the world rightly, you see yourself rightly, your pattern of thinking is all right up until the moment you see that it's not. And then you go, oh, I have been thinking wrongly here. I've not been thinking, and not wrong is probably isn't the right word, is it? In accordance with the truth. Truth about me, truth about the world, truth about God.
Yeah. Well, like the whole idea of like body dysmorphia, right? Your brain is telling you to process the way you look in a specific way that is not accurate.
Yeah.
And that's why like people who do have like struggles with eating disorders, they like need other people to kind of normalize to and by normalize I mean don't make the dysmorphia seem like it's normal, but more like let's pull you closer to what reality really is. Let's reevaluate. And I kind of struggled with that about 10 years ago. I'd lost a bunch of weight, and I started to think that the way I looked was okay, and I was scared to gain weight back and stuff, which obviously I've certainly gotten over. But it was interesting to me, and just kind of how you can start to idolize something that's unhealthy because you think that's where you're supposed to be.
So distorted, and you have no idea.
Yeah.
Those people, yeah, who are super thin, like we would look at most people would look at them and they're skeletal, and yet they will see the same body and say, oh, it's fat. I'm like, oh. And that's just a visual example of so many other things that we don't think correctly about, is your point.
Right. Because there's so many other things that that are not present outwardly that that we kind of need to the little nudge to correct. And I think I could come up with a zillion different examples, but I think everybody's kind of got their own bucket of stuff. The things where they just need to be reminded about who they are, or just, hey, let me reflect back to you what I see. Here's the person that I see. Here's the wonderful things about you. Here's what Christ, and it's
all of that.
Yeah.
And you had an interesting aha, you said, after the service. I think it had to do while you were singing How He Loves Us.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. And the timing was kind of interesting because I mentioned earlier in the service the idea that sometimes we listen to songs over and over and over again. And at some point, it seems like, well, I know this song. I'm not going to get anything new out of it. And then you hear a lyric in a different way for some reason, and you gain a new perspective on that. And I don't know how many times that I have led How He Loves. It's probably thousands of times, at least, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of times, let's say, the point where it's basically memorized. And that's almost kind of dangerous because then you've almost stopped thinking about it. But as I was reflecting on the lyrics while I was leading this Sunday, I saw them in a different way. And that is the idea that the lyrics are very clearly saying that if I focus on how He loves me, then I don't have time to get mired up in all the other messed up things that tend to weigh me down or try to steal my attention or try to identify me in an unhealthy way. Like, I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way He loves me. I mean, that's kind of the key right there. And I can get mired in regrets. I can feel myself being dragged down by bad decisions that I've made and how I wish that I were better or had done different things. But if I focus on His grace and how He loves me, the sacrificial, scandalous nature of His love, then it's like an eclipse over the top of my regret. Like, you can't even see the regret anymore.
Right. And when that switch happens, which we've all had moments at least where that happens, just being what we want to be, just, like Jesus and caring about people and all of not having all that baggage, it just happens. It's not something it's not a fight. It's not a duty. It just flows out of you. It's, and that's how we're designed. But yeah, I just want people free. I want to be free. And this deep transformation it's hard, but it's so worth it. And it's so needed in our current culture, Christian culture, where we are so un-Christ-like, that hopefully we can change that a little bit, even if it's just in our own little church.
Yeah. You made me think of one other thing, and I don't know how profound it is, but I've mentioned in the past, like, how transforming it can be the first time you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're like, oh, wow, I can't, and it changes the way you interact with the world. That's relatable when you're 15, and we can kind of reflect on that. But also as adults, every once in a while, people will engage with you and share an observation about you that you had not considered, and in a positive way, like, oh, I really like the way that you said this one thing, and it comes from somebody you hardly know, but it's a genuine reflection that you had never considered. And then little things like that will cause me to stop and go, wow, I never even thought about that. And I think we can be the person that occasionally drops little nuggets into people's lives just through, little gratitudes to say, I really appreciated this. Dixie does this to me all the time. I really appreciated how you did this today. Oh, never thought about that. Thank you very much. Okay, cool.
There, and I want, that made me say two more things. I know I'm watching our time. Is there's a friend of ours who had someone said, well, because she was wrestling. Well, why are they struggling with this thing that doesn't seem very hard? I've gone through much harder stuff, and they just looked at them, trying to keep them completely anonymous, and said, well, it's because you're super resilient. And they went, am I? and the person speaking into their life was like, well, yeah, obviously so. And she had never thought of herself as resilient. Well, yeah, you are. It's obvious to everybody else, but not to her.
Yeah.
So just because we don't see ourselves that way. But the last thing I wanted to say, if you need or would like someone to help be one of those professional counselors, professional disciples in your life, let me know, or email or a message to church, and I will do what I can to help find a good one. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and also Vanessa is happy to help with referrals. I mentioned the sermon to her, and she said that that if people are looking for a counselor, she's very engaged in the network of counselors in this area and the different clinics, and can help facilitate that to some degree. So don't be afraid to reach out to us.
And if you find one and you go, this doesn't work for me, there's a huge variety in types of them. Yep. Some are much better than others, right? And so you just got to find the right one. So, all right.
Amen.
All right, you guys take care, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.
See you on Sunday, folks. Take care.
Take care.